next guest speaker. Mr. Srinivasa Addepalli is the director on the board of Tata Communications subsidiaries in the retail broadband and transformation service business. He is responsible for strategy formulation and execution and manages all new strategic initiatives including growth plans, entry into new market and mergers and acquisition.
Mr. Addepalli has considerable experience in developing strategies and business plans, particularly in the Indian and global telecom sector. His previous experience includes a business consulting stint with the Tata Strategic Management Group, focusing on the telecom and media industries. Mr. Addepalli holds a Master's in Business Administration from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Sir, I would now request you to come on dais and address the crowd.
Hi, good afternoon. I know I'm keeping you all away from lunch, but I'll do my best keeping myself away from lunch. So my intention here is to do a short presentation to share with you my perspective of some of the changes that are happening around the world as we live in, and to think about from a strategy and more importantly from a marketing perspective what implications those have, how we need to rethink how marketing needs to be done going forward. And I will kind of conclude with how you all and all of us have a unique advantage in the new world that we are getting into. I'm trying a different presentation format for the first time, so you must excuse me if there are any technical glitches. Technology always has great intentions, doesn't always perform as we desire it to. So I'll try my best. This is the first time. So you are my guinea pigs for this new presentation technique. It's there on the net. I have sent the link to your team, so you can use this presentation going forward. And try and create your own presentations on that website. So you heard who I am. You can find me on the internet quite prominently, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or on blog areas. And part of our conversation today is going to be about how the world is changing in the context of the internet. Right? It's a new world. So the world is changing much faster, much more rapidly than any of us, particularly those of us who are in business, those who have to develop strategies, and think about the future, think about the customers today. It's changing very fast. And to give you some instances of what the changes that are happening around us. One, there's several new markets that are emerging. So if you just take, now in a very long-term perspective, markets ought to be proportional to the number of people who live in them. Right? If everything were to be equal, if everyone had the same earning potential, the same creation potential, markets ought to be proportional to the number of people in them. So obviously, just from those two metrics and many other metrics, China and India become the most prominent markets that anyone should be thinking about going forward. But there's also some a new interesting market that has come about, and that is what I call the Facebook market or the Facebook nation. If Facebook were a country, it would actually be bigger than the US. And an interesting thing is a lot of people who are on Facebook, and Facebook here is just a representation of the kind of new markets that are getting created on the internet. So if Facebook were a country, it would be bigger than the biggest economy out there, the US. And the interesting thing is that Facebook and many others like Facebook are getting most of their new audiences from markets such as India, China, Brazil, and South Africa. And therefore, these are the new markets that you need to be thinking about as you step out into the industry and think about what are the markets that you have to tackle in the next 10 years. The markets that we've tackled for the last 10 years are dying. Right? The markets that you will be tackling for the next 10 years are some of these. And also the people that you will be addressing will be much younger, much more exposed to technology than ever before. Right? 2-year-olds, and you can go look up on YouTube, just search for 2-year-old iPad. Right? 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds are actually using gadgets and using them in an interesting manner. It's not just kind of playing with a toy. They're actually using the content, using applications on them. So what you're faced with are going to be new customers that have been exposed to a lot more of content and applications right from almost their birth. What does it mean in terms of what kind of products and services you have to create as they grow up and start to get earning potential and spending potential? You will be looking at very different markets. The kids of the next generation will be very different from you and how we were when we were kids. And start to think about those things, because you have to think about markets that will get created in the next 5 to 10 years. And obviously their behavior is changing. Right? Today, customers are much more social. They talk more to each other. They spend a lot of time doing things that most of us didn't think existed even 3 years ago. There are people spending more than an hour on Facebook. You think, how can this sheer waste of human potential, right? 1 hour every day of 500 million people using Facebook every day, in my language or in my world, would be sheer human waste, right? But in the new world, that's huge opportunity. Right? There's a new report that's come out and it's available on the net for free. Just check the Cisco website. It's about the scenarios for the internet going forward. They calculate that the internet-based economy is $3 trillion in size. That's a huge market. Right? And these 500 million people who are spending an hour every day on Facebook are contributing to the creation of such an economy that 3 years ago didn't exist at all. Right? So think of what this could create and what you can help market to them the 1 hour that they spend on Facebook. The most important thing, and we talked about the fact that most of these people are accessing them from emerging markets. Obviously, they don't have good quality broadband networks. Right? So how are they accessing this? Using mobile phones. So 100 million of the 500 million Facebook users today access it from mobile phones. So whether it's an iPhone or the BlackBerry or many other Android smartphones, or as most of us in India still do, using the SMS as a basic connectivity to access Twitter or Facebook or many other internet sites. And this is really what's driving that economy. 500,000 applications on Facebook that create potential for advertising, that create potential for monetization of new services, new content. And that's your market potential that you should be thinking about. So it's a fast-changing world. Now, when we think about marketing and actually strategy, I manage strategy and marketing at my organization, and I sometimes fail to see the difference between the two. I think strategy is marketing and marketing is strategy. And so if you think about any business process of how something happens, the process is kind of something like this. Obviously, there's some form of an idea or invention that comes to an entrepreneur or an organization. Some form of a market analysis happens. The market analysis leads to identifying some gaps or opportunities in the market. So, and then there's a little more of market analysis done to size it, to do the business planning and everything else. And then you create a product, a product or a service to address that opportunity. Then you think about how do I position my product or service in the marketplace, right? So what's the value proposition to the customer? Obviously, around the time of the market analysis, you also thought about who your customers are, where they are, how do they behave, and therefore you get to a positioning or a value proposition thought, and then you go to market. Right? That's traditionally been the marketing process, and then you get some customer feedback, and then you loop it back into your next cycle of product development. Is that relevant in the new world? Yeah, it's going to be relevant at any time. Right? This as a process, a generic process of how business ideation happens and how you create markets and services and go to market as a generic template is valid even going forward. What's going to change is, and there are two things that are going to change. Right? One, the time taken to do these steps is changing dramatically, right? And two, from being a linear process, right? As you see, this is largely a linear process over here. You don't have too much of interaction in the traditional way of doing this. You do this, then go to the next step. Sometimes you do a little bit of a loop back, but traditionally it's a linear process of I have an idea, I will take it to market, feedback, and then maybe there's a circular loop, right? There's a little bit like electronic circuits with a feedback mechanism. That is going to change, and that has changed. And we'll talk a little bit about how that is happening. So what's changed is obviously you have shorter cycle times of how these things get done. The value chains that we thought about in terms of any business are now kind of getting redesigned into ecosystems, and then we'll talk about how business itself is changing. So let's take each one of them at a time. Shorter cycle times. And the shorter cycle times could be, think about product life cycles, right? Just the sheer end-to-end of from an idea to going to market and becoming successful. Right? How long does that life cycle of becoming successful and usually even then getting that and then dying, and how long does that take? I'm in the telecom industry, so I'll give you a few examples from the telecom space, but now you can go back and look at many industries of similar trends have followed. The first telephone that was created, for it to become globally adopted, which means wide adoption in many countries, reasonable penetration of the service, took 100 years for the telephone to be globally adopted, right? And to become successful as a product. The mobile phone, which came during the late 70s in its first avatar, but really 80s is when it kind of picked up. Took about 20 years. So we saw in India it was the late 90s when the mobile phone got introduced. Most countries introduced at that time. So about 20 years for the mobile phone to become successful. Then kind of just zooming forward, a YouTube as a new form of video communication was introduced. It took them about 2 years to be widely successful. Then Twitter was launched a couple of years ago. In less than 2 years, it had become a hugely widely successful product. Now there are many other examples of products or services that in few months become kind of widely successful in their respective categories or end up creating new categories. Right? Take the iPad, for example, a category that didn't exist in its form or was not known. In about 6 months' time since it was announced, it's been reasonably globally widespread. It's not, I wouldn't yet call it in that category because globally adopted means 70% of the countries should have adopted it. Okay. So this is when my presentation loses some focus. Yeah. Okay. The other thing that's happening, so product life cycles are getting shorter in terms of how much time it takes for a new product to get into the market and for it to get in. So what does it mean? So if you're already a player in the marketplace, when you think, we think strategy, we kind of develop 3 to 5 year strategic plans. Imagine if someone else would enter your market, right, and in less than 2 years become globally successful. You could be pretty much wiped out in a 2 year period. Right? So that probably is the maximum life cycle that you have in terms of protecting your current market and doing something to keep retaining it or growing it. Right? So from developing 5-year plans and 10-year plans, business plans, typically a 2-year cycle towards thinking about markets and planning is now what is relevant in the business environment, particularly in markets like technology and so on. There are other industries where there's still guarantee of success for a little longer, but 2 years in the technology or the new areas is the maximum that you can think about as your protection of breathing space.